SpaceX's lack of experience, $1.6 billion,
overruled
could compromise safety.
Armstrong testified against commercial spaceflight.
No, I wish they would come and visit and see the hardware that we're doing here. And I think that would change their mind. You know, those guys are heroes of mine.
There are many more ways to fail than to succeed. For a rocket, there's like 1,000 ways a thing can fail and like one way it can work. You could have a lot of rocket failures.
Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket.
3, 2, 1.
What I'm trying to do is to make a significant difference in spaceflight and help make spaceflight accessible to almost anyone.
There need to be reasons to get up in the morning. You know, life can't just be about solving problems. Otherwise, what's the point? There's got to be things that people find inspiring and make life worth living.
If somebody is doing something that is useful to the rest of society, I think that's a good thing. Like, it doesn't have to change the world. Like, if you're doing something that has high value to people, I think that's fine. Like, stuff doesn't need to be changed the world just to be good. Depending upon how well you want to do, and particularly if you're starting a company, you need to work super hard. And I mean, if you do simple math, you say like, okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as the other company.
I am somewhat impulsive, and I don't really want to try to adhere to some CEO template.
A natural human tendency is wishful thinking. A challenge for entrepreneurs is to say, well, what's the difference between really believing in your ideals and sticking to them versus pursuing some unrealistic dream? That is a really difficult thing to tell. Can you tell the difference between those two things? I think certainly being focused on something that you're confident will have high value to someone else, and just being really rigorous in making that assessment. I think certainly extremely tenacious, and then just work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in, 80 to 100 hour weeks every week.
I mean, I think it's like quite painful and difficult.
So all those things improve the odds of success. I came to the conclusion that if we can advance the knowledge of the world, if we can do things that expand the scope and scale of consciousness, then we're better able to ask the right questions and become more enlightened, and that's really the only way forward.
That's unreal.
Space is hard, and rockets tend to fail, unfortunately. Even when you've got like a lot of really smart people working super hard to minimize the probability of failure, it's still there, and it's quite significant. And people have asked me like, well, why are rockets especially hard? And part of it is like everything has to work the first time. Like there's no, you can't do a recall, you can't patch it. It's like 9 minutes to orbit or it's over. You can never test the rocket completely in the environment that it's actually going to experience. You can't fully recreate something that's moving super fast in a vacuum on the surface of Earth. Like you can only really recreate that in space. I mean, I think it's like quite painful and difficult, honestly, and it feels terrible. Yeah, I mean, the company is sort of looking to me to rally them, and I do. But I honestly feel super bad.
So what does super hard mean? Well, when my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hot up we had just one computer. So the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night. 7 days a week, all the time.
If other people are putting in 40-hour work weeks and you're putting in 100-hour work weeks, then even if you're doing the same thing, you know that you will achieve in 4 months what it takes them a year to achieve. When I was young, I didn't really know what I was going to do when I got older. People kept asking me, but then eventually I thought that the idea of inventing things would be really cool. And the reason I thought that was because I read a quote from Arthur C. Clarke, which said that a sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And that's really true. If you go back, say 300 years, The things that we take for granted today would be, you'd be burned at the stake for. Being able to fly, that's crazy. Being able to see over long distances, being able to communicate, having effectively with the internet a group mind of sorts, and having access to all the world's information instantly from almost anywhere on the earth. This is stuff that really would be magic, or would be considered magic in times past. In fact, I think it actually goes beyond that, because there are many things that we take for granted today that weren't even imagined in times past. They weren't even in the realm of magic. So it actually goes beyond that. So I thought, well, if I can do some of those things, basically if I can advance technology, then that's like magic, and that would be really cool. And I was at sort of a slight existential crisis, because I was trying to figure out what does it all mean? Like, what's the purpose of things? And I came to the conclusion that if we can advance the knowledge of the world, if we can do things that expand the scope and scale of consciousness, then we're better able to ask the right questions and become more enlightened, and that's really the only way forward. For any given company, just can keep thinking about, are these efforts that people are expending, are they resulting in a better product or service? And if they're not, stop those efforts. And then the final thing is don't just follow the trend. You may have heard me say that it's good to think in terms of the physics approach or first principles, which is, rather than reasoning by analogy, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths you can imagine, and you reason up from there. And this is a good way to figure out if something really makes sense, or if it's just what everybody else is doing. It's hard to think that way. You can't think that way about everything. It takes a lot of effort. But if you're trying to do something new, it's the best way to think. And that framework was developed by physicists to figure out counterintuitive things like quantum mechanics. So it's really a powerful method. I think that the final thing I would encourage you to do is, now is the time to take risk. You don't have, you don't have kids. Your obligation. Well, probably don't have kids. But as you get older, your obligations increase. So and once you have a family, you start taking risk not just for yourself, but for your family as well. It gets much harder to do things that might not work out. So now is the time to do that before you have those obligations. So I would encourage you to take risks now. Do something bold. You won't regret it. Thank you.